Hello, welcome from the frozen tundra that is Charleston, South Carolina. We're snowed in. We're snowed in. As you can see, everybody, we're just happy to actually be online. What we're dealing with in the midst of, at least in our household, e-learning right now, which I'm just happy that you can't hear what I can hear. Trying to just navigate this space. But we're here. We have made it, and we're glad that you are here with us as well. And I'm still working on trying to get this shared to Facebook as we speak. So for those who are looking for us there through my page, hopefully I'll get it shared there pretty soon. How you doing, Dr. Frederica Brooks Davis?
I am doing well, although I'm certainly saddened and want us to really open up today in praying for just our country and our nation. There's so much going on now. We're having, of course, we know recently the shooting in Nashville where the 17-year-old young man shot several individuals there, and one life for sure was lost and others were injured. So just kind of reading this young man's manifesto, it's just really sad all the way around. And just in general, I don't know if you're sensing, but I'm certainly sensing that persons are experiencing anxiety in this time, just hurt and disappointment. So I think if we could today just kind of lift that up in prayer, but prior to joining in and talking about where we left off last week, if that's okay with you, Pastor.
No, I agree. We just finished being online with the church with a devotional. We're in a 40-day consecration, and I am very glad that we're in it. I need it personally for myself, but I think all of those who are journeying with us need it, because we are really in a precarious space. And you really have to actually be careful how much you're exposing yourself to it, because every moment right now, there seems to be quite an influx of information that can be very discouraging and disparaging. With that said, we've got a journey ahead of us here. And I think that's also where people are. It's realizing no matter how you do the calculus, this is probably the beginning of what we're dealing with. So with that, we need to be prayerful, and the foundation that we have is incredibly important. as we
Mhm.
go through this season that can be very discouraging. But there is yet hope, and there is life beyond this season. And it's figuring out how and what do I need to do to navigate this terrain, with the realization that this is not where I will live. This is just where I am right now. And there is strength that will be given to me through the difficulty and the adversity of this season. Now that sounds good, Pastor. Yeah, it does, but it ain't easy, right? I'm hearing myself say that, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm gearing up for this fight, right? I'm gearing up for all that has to happen. So with that said, I agree. Everybody, I want to invite you to just join with us for a moment of prayer as we center right now and ask for hope in this moment. Let us pray. Most holy and awesome God, we come to you today with hearts that are experiencing many different emotions, trying to process through many different experiences, and even, Lord, what is happening within our society right now. Lord, there is no shortage of traumatic experiences, everything from trying to recover from extreme fires to places receiving cold weather and winter precipitation that are breaking records, to the unprecedented acts that are happening within our government right now. Lord, it can be difficult for us to just wrap our minds around what it means to exist here right now. But Lord, in the midst of it all, we know that there is a peace that far surpasses the understanding of our circumstances, that there is made available to us a joy that comes from healthy and beloved community, and Lord, comes from you as well. And so, God, we center now not on our problems, not on our stressors or even our worries, not on the collective pain or even the individual pain of grief and disappointment, job loss, and other things creating insecurities in our lives. We, Lord, ask that you would help us to see past what we're dealing with right now and onward towards the hope of a brighter future and a better tomorrow. Remind us, oh God, that where we are now is not where we will remain. And that, Lord, there have been very harmful, dangerous, negative things happening for many centuries. And yet, somehow, here we are today. And so, for those who are dealing with recovering from acts of violence, recovering from natural disasters, recovering, oh God, from laws and executive orders and things being done that are pushing them out of employment or threatening, Lord, their livelihood. We speak peace now over every heart and ask that you would help us to find the path forward that leads to healing, wholeness, and justice. We thank you now in the name of Christ Jesus, we pray. Amen, amen, and amen. Amen. All right, family, let's take a deep breath before we jump into this. Collective sigh. All right. All right. We took it to the Lord in prayer.
Yep.
Now, with that said, um, there's still a life to live.
Yeah.
And we started a conversation last time we were together. I got some feedback from some of our single folk out there. I think you did too.
Yep.
And they were pretty excited about this topic and looking forward to hearing some more red flags. So just so everybody's made aware, maybe you're tuning in for the first time and you missed the first episode. But we're talking about navigating dating and cuffing season. And we really went into defining on the last episode what cuffing is. And we weighed in on our perspectives on that and the dangers of approaching relationship with a mentality of cuffing and all that. So we won't rehash that. Where we had jumped into now was more so of the dating side, the dating scene, and specifically, what are red flags? Red flags, warning that you should not drive through because if you do, you're probably going to be in an accident of some type. That's what we're talking about. Is that right, Dr. Frederica? You with me on that?
I'm with you.
All right. So with that said, some of this, because I think we only got through 2 last time we were together, some of this will be a bit of recapping that because I think these are being fused in what we talk. But we're gonna quick fire go through what we consider red flags. We invite you to chime in to the chat section. You can expound further, maybe as we talk about it. You're like, yeah, amen, been there, done that, right? Or hey, here's a place where you want to ask a question or even push us a little bit on some of what we have to say. But here's the first red flag that I'd like to jump on today, and we talked about it a little bit last time, Dr. Frederica, and is this: a lack of alignment in faith and values, right? The classic don't be unequally yoked, as we call it from a spiritual standpoint, right? If the person that you are going out with, developing a relationship with, if there is a serious disconnect in your value system, right, in your faith, or they attempt to downplay your faith or downplay your value system, that's a red flag. That's a red flag to me. What do you say, Dr. Frederica?
I agree. So oftentimes people ask the question, well, what happens if I believe stronger than the person that I'm dating, right? If I'm further on my journey than they are, is that okay? Well, I think it's one of those things, there's a risk involved, right? Because the reality is, if the person you're dating is a babe in Christ, the Bible talks about milk versus meat. And so let's say you're on meat, they're on milk. Then the possible danger there is that the person on milk may never grow to meat. And so therefore there's going to be you're going to be unequally yoked. But let's take it to this current time. Pastor Byron opened us up in prayer as we're living in this current. So let's just make it relevant to today. So let's say perhaps you're dating someone and they are a non-believer, but you are a believer. And your job has sent you home 5 days because, well, really now you're on leave because your office focused on DEI or whatever it might be. You're in a season where you're right now, yes, you may get paid leave, but what happens when leave runs out, right? What happens if you don't have a job? What happens? And this is in any situation, any administration. At the end of the day, my point is, if you lose your job suddenly for whatever reason, if you have an incident where it's health related and you can no longer bring in income, now what are you going to do? And so if you're a believer, your natural instinct prayerfully is that you're going to pray, you're going to say, we're going to trust God to get through this. But if your partner is not a believer, if your partner has not had experiences where they depended on God, then that can become problematic. And so in the dating relationship, as much as possible, ask questions like, if they say they're a believer, tell me the last time you had to trust God for something. Trust God beyond you actually fixing, in air quotes, a situation, and have an opportunity to really see how they trust God for the challenging times, but also how grateful they are when the overflow comes. Your thoughts, Pastor?
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree, because here's what happens when troubled times or difficulties come. That's when our faith and our value system really means a significant amount to us in being able to just persevere through it. So how can two walk together unless they be agreed? If when trouble comes, I'm running to God and you're running to something that is a contradiction to my value system, right? And we could come up with a number of things. Well, now we can't even align, right, on how we're going to address this problem. If we can't align on how we're going to address the problem, then it's going to be very difficult for us to end up on the other side of that problem aligned and together. We might both get to the other side of that problem, but now we've got a whole nother list of problems as relates to our relationship with how we just dealt with this problem. The other side is this: remember, values end up going into how we raise our children and how we engage in other relationships, how I treat my parents, right? How I'm going to treat your parents or your siblings or your friends and your loved ones. And then there's that dynamic. Birds of a feather flock together. So now typically, right, people align with people who have similar values as they do within their social network. So you're really looking at quite a few hurdles that would be detrimental to overcome because we just don't believe the same way, which means that affects our whole perspective of how we see the world, how we see our troubles, and how we see our way through those troubles. So now we're going to add troubles onto our troubles. So aligning on a value system. Now, again, just like Dr. Frederica said, sometimes that does not mean necessarily that we're in the same place exactly. And we're going to talk a little bit about another red flag later that I think feeds into this, right? But we can pretty much see basically if you keep doing exactly what you're doing, where you're headed, right? This goes back to last week where you don't date potential, right? So you're already living out a value system in a faith that is headed in a particular trajectory. So if you keep doing what you're doing right now, not adding to it, not what could happen, not potential, but if you keep doing what you're doing right now, will you end up in a place where it aligns us more? Right? So it's not that talking about, okay, I'm stronger in the faith, right? Well, are they in the faith though? Right? Like, are they going to church? Are they committed? Like, what's their commitment level? Because if they have a strong commitment level, but they've just not been at it as long as you are, well, they're on the path anyway. And they were on the path without you. This is their thing. But if the commitment isn't there, and it's more that I'm just this culturally, right? I just, I kind of grew up in it, but I really ain't about it. Right. Well, that's a whole different dynamic. And again, you can pretty much look at what a person's doing and say, if they keep doing what they're doing now, does it take them to a place where I see us being able to be aligned? That's my take on it. Good doctor.
Okay. We're in agreement. All right. Rapid fire. What you have next? What's another
Rapid fire. All right. Next up, disrespect or controlling behavior. So just flat out, now granted, respect has to be discussed, right, within a relationship, because you could not mean to be disrespectful, but the way that your tone or whatever, as we talk through it, I can tell you, hey, that was disrespectful. But then adjustments will be made because you don't mean to be that. The motive was not to be disrespectful. I'm talking about here when there is intentional disrespect or controlling behavior. So they're belittling you, undermining you, speaking harshly towards you, right? Trying to undercut you, or always needing to know. And we talked a little bit about this, how sometimes controlling behavior is because of past hurts. But this is, hey, extreme controlling behavior. To me, red flag, double red flag, triple red flag. What about you, Dr. Frederica?
I would agree. So oftentimes, what does controlling behavior tell us, right? What does it tell us about ourselves? Oftentimes when we start talking about communication styles such as passive aggressive, assertive, ideally we are assertive in our communication, but someone who is aggressive in nature, then yes, that is the person that may belittle you. The message there is what they say is right and you hold no value, where the idea is that we need to talk together, right? We respect each other. And to Pastor Byron's point, like, what does respect mean? Also, many of us date persons who are from different cultures, right? So, understanding within each other's culture, what does it mean to be respectful? Because that is important, right? You might date someone and you enjoy him, you enjoy her, but then when you meet family, then that's a whole different dynamic, because it might be that the elders are the ones that take your partner's focus. And you are accustomed to having that person's attention, but now you have to sit back, right? You cannot sit beside your partner. They are going to be seated next to their grandparent or whomever the elder might be. Are you going to be okay with that when the attention is not on you? And then when and if that happens, if you had not had this conversation about respect and how it shows up within our families, then you may feel disrespected. But in that sense, were you being disrespected? No, it's that the culture suggests one thing. So again, that's why it's important to engage in that early on. The other reason is there are some things that one person may find okay and someone else may not. Like for me, I go ahead and set boundaries up early on. Like, we're not going to be cussing each other out. Like, that's for me an issue around communication. We need to use our words, and we don't need to get to a place where we can't talk about it. So managing expectations. And so I've had gentlemen tell me that that's different for them. Like, it's nothing for them to go back and forth. And that kind of fuels the relationship, and they kind of enjoy that. Okay, well, that's good. You won't get that here. So I'm probably going to be a little boring to you, because I'm not saying we don't have disagreements. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying it's about how you communicate that, and what you find to be respectful. So for me, if you're cussing me out, that's disrespectful. But somebody else might not find it disrespectful because they're cussing you out. You know what I'm saying? So again, yes, to your point, I think it's good to have those conversations early.
Yeah, and I think it's I think even if our perception is something is not disrespectful, that does not mean it's healthy, right? Because based on our experiences, we could have normalized unhealthy patterns of behavior, right? And so now when you get with somebody, and this again is why we have to come to agreement. Now it's forcing you to grow, because this thing has been normative, right? The other person's not okay with, right? And in our relationship, Yaz and I, when we were dating and through to now 12 years of marriage, it's been understood that there are certain things that are just out of bounds. We're never going to call each other out of our names. We're never going to cuss at each other and things of that nature. Like we're just, that's just out of bounds. That's not how we operate in a way that is healthy, and a way for us that is within our value system of how we love and respect one another. So those things are very, very important. The other thing I'll say that sometimes happens too, Dr. Frederica, as you were talking about, we find out that the dynamics of elders and stuff is also work experience, right? So, it could be that as one partner begins to get elevated in their professional career, right? And so before, maybe they weren't even working when you first started dating or when you got married. Maybe they were just in school, right? Or maybe in the beginning they would stay at home because you were having children, things of that nature. You're just in a different season. But then that season ends, and they're getting elevated in whether it's the work that they do vocationally or the service they give, right? And so now there's a whole lot of other attention that's on them. Can you support them? Can you take on and shift the roles, right? Or do you begin to control them and keep them from being able to be elevated in their particular career path or in what's really in their heart? Granted, like there has to be balance and conversation around that. But these are things that you can pick up on when you're dating before it manifests in your marriage. Because what can be seen as a benign little controlling way when you're dating, when you get married, that exacerbates potentially. And now you feel stuck and like you can't really move forward in your life because the other person's insecurities or whatever the reason is are completely hampering and hindering you. So I wanted to add just that piece too.
That's good stuff. So this is in real time, right? So I know that I talk with family members and friends around this idea of, as a woman, a single woman, women who have progressed in their respective fields, often finding themselves asking the question, do I need to shrink who I am? Do I say who I really am? So we know if you ever, even if you sit on an airplane, if you ever travel, if you're around, this is generally speaking, you're around men, one of the first things you hear men talk about, hey, how you doing? Where are you? Where you work, right? What's your title? What are you doing? That kind of thing. Well, in a dating relationship, what I hear often is women asking themselves, do I tell a person, a man that I meet, in this particular scenario, a man that I meet where I'm working? Or do I wait until there's some investment because I don't want him in any way to feel that he can't be himself or have issues around that? So I think, to your point, it's very important when we talk about, even we often think about unequally yoked just spiritually, but it's in all areas. Like, what exactly are you looking to do and achieve? And what I always tell women and men alike, that who you are on day one, just show up. Don't send your representative. You know, if you happen to have a position of status within your field and you're making 6, 7 figures, you're making 4 figures, whatever that might be, show up as you are, be who you are. And if they are not able to receive that, then, you know, like for me personally, the question is, can you go to a restaurant where there are no prices on the menu? Okay. And be able to sit there, enjoy, and not have a fit because you don't see prices on the menu, right? So can you go and be in that setting? And do you know which utensil to pick up first? But at the same token, can I have my house dress on? Can you have your sweats on and we chill out? So it's the full range for me, right? So can you, and then if we are talking about going in environments and it's one in which you've never been in before, are you open to receive feedback? You know, I was dating this guy one time. Oh Lord. He just he wanted to pretend that he was accustomed to certain things, but he wasn't. And so when you talk to him in a certain way, he, no matter how nice, in air quotes, you try to present it, it was always an issue. And so it was like, ultimately for me, yeah, nah, because again, to your point, insecurities, like, we're not going to be dealing with this. Who wants that? So yeah, I think that's important. I have a red flag for you, Pastor, that
Uh-oh.
I want to mention. So how about sex before marriage?
Oh, wow. We just,
Yes. So is it a red flag if, in fact, you are dating and one person wants to engage in sex and the other person does not? Is that a red flag? Are there certain boundaries, right? Can we cuff in the snow? All this snow is happening everywhere. It's cold outside. Can we cuff? Which is, all we doing is like just kind of laying there. We ain't having sex. Is that all right if my partner wants to do that? What you got on that, good pastor?
boy, and listen, she did not give me a heads up on this, y'all. Like she had that locked and loaded, and just go throw it at me like this. So one, let me say this. This is going back to our value systems, right? And whether our value systems align. Now, I'm going to come from a pastoral view here, right? So let me just hit that. But in hitting that, in talking about that, let me just say, right, that we need to make sure we define what the purpose, right, of intimacy, sexual intimacy, really is supposed to be about. Because here it is in general. If you engage prematurely, right, in building that physical intimacy before you've connected on that mental and spiritual level, you are putting the cart before the horse. You're opening your mind and your spirit and your emotions up to all these things, to the point where you may not really know if you really want to be with them, because You just focused on the sex, and you focused on that high and everything, and not really. And so you may not even really be thinking straight through this. If a person really wants to be with you and your value systems have aligned, they will not have a problem waiting and making sure that things are done in a way so that you connect first on that mental, emotional, spiritual level. And again, remember, intimacy is bigger than just sex. As a matter of fact, in our premarital sessions that I do with our couples, we have a session where we just talk about sex and intimacy, where we define intimacy, we define the role of sex, and where we talk about what are you going to do when a season comes and you cannot engage, because it happens, right? It's going to happen for one reason or another, whether it's a health reason, whether it's you had a child, whether it's you name it. There are reasons. So if you've never had a season where you've learned how to navigate without having that as a major core part of your relationship, then you don't actually know how to navigate that. And so you've got to figure that out. So it makes sense, a whole lot of sense, for you to start your relationship out with building all the other things that are going to keep and sustain your relationship, because that ain't going to keep and sustain your relationship. That at some point, especially if you plan on being together for a long time, you ain't going to be able to do that like you to do that. I don't care who you are or what you think, right? Because it's just not supposed to be as much of a part that we make it. I'm not saying that you should do it like yes, like it's supposed to be fruitful and loving and connecting. And yes, it causes you to feel more deeply connected with your spouse and all that. But what I am saying is you need to be very hesitant before you cross over that line, because it convolutes the whole relationship. And if you have not gotten the other things where they need to be, you're probably going to add something that's only going to continue confusing. So the last thing I'll say about it is if my standard and value is I am waiting and you do not respect that, for me, that's a red flag. If you can't honor that, if you can't work with me in that thing, then it's a red flag, because you're forcing me to compromise on my value, on my faith, right? In order to just meet you where you are. And I do not believe that is fair. And there's a number of reasons, why either party may be doing what they're doing. All that has to be talked about. But you asked me if it's a red flag. I'm saying yes. I believe there's a huge potential for that to be a red flag.
Your internet got wonky, as you were saying, but I think overall we understood exactly what you were saying. And so I would say that I agree. I would also say, because this comes up for me oftentimes in working with couples, particularly where they may have been unequally yoked or where they have engaged in sex and now they're coming in for premarital. One of the things that as you're getting to know your partner, it's good to talk about it. Like, what was your history prior to? Like, were you sexually active in past relationships? Are you currently, so if you decide that you want, because I do think it is a mutual decision, right? When you're in a relationship with someone, are we going to abstain from sex? And if so, why? But what has sex been like for you in the past? What has your experience been? Because believe it or not, whatever you experienced in the past, you're bringing it in your current situation. So engaging in those conversations early, like what does sex mean to me and what intimacy means, I think are very good. So yeah, thank you for that, Pastor Byron.
But one thing about that in general. So when I work with our couples in premarital, the first thing I ask them to do is, on a scale from 1 to 10, rate how comfortable you are even talking about sex and intimacy. And what I have found out is a good number of our folk aren't even comfortable talking about it. They haven't even processed through it themselves to be able to have a conversation about it with the other person. So we're just bringing all of these experiences with us without even having conversations and defining, which means also in marriage, that's setting you up to not have as a healthy, intimate relationship with your partner, with your spouse, because you've got to be able to communicate really well. What you like, what you don't like, what makes you feel connected, what makes you feel disconnected, all those kinds of things are vital to actually having a very healthy relationship once you're married. So if you can't have those discussions and really engage in that, you're setting yourself up to not have a healthy relationship once you're married. And the last thing I'll say about it too is, because I've seen this happen too, people were very much engaging in the act of sex prior to marriage, right? Then they get married and all of a sudden one of the partners, right, no longer is engaging at that level. All the issues that have not been addressed and talked about that you were just mentioning, now all of them are surfaced. And so now the other person really feels slighted because now we're married. And you mean to tell me that we were engaging in this act more before we got married, and now that we are married, all of a sudden I'm feeling disconnected. And once again, I say this happens because we're putting the cart before the horse. We did not develop the other things that we needed to develop, so that then this thing that could really be phenomenal icing on the cake is not where it needs to be to apply it in a way that enhances the cake. So that's just something that I have seen and noticed happen quite often with couples. All right. Woo. Y'all see what she tried to do to me.
And y'all, I'm apologizing. We're having some technical issues, so I'm hoping you're able to hear us. If not, catch the replay if you're watching the replay. I'm not sure what's going on, but we're going to keep pressing through.
We are. And we will press through. So is it back on me?
Yes. Your
All
turn.
right. Red flag. Here we go. Are we ready?
Yes.
Avoidance of commitment. We don't have to define this. You know, let's just, I know it's been 6 months, but you know, I like you. You know, like why we got to define it? Why do we have to, talk about where we're headed? Why can't we just let things play out? I mean, it's been good this last 5 years, right? So and while we're laughing, right, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
To where people are not clear cut on where they're headed or what their real desire or intentions are, and are definitely doing an avoidance dance around commitment. Red flag. People know what they want and they know what they don't want oftentimes, right? Especially after a while. Sometimes it's just we're not being honest because we're afraid that we may lose what we got if we actually say what we want. And so now I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too. I don't really want to be committed, but I also don't want to lose you. And so I'm going to refrain from actually committing and changing my Facebook status, but I'm also not going to completely be honest about the fact that I don't really want to be committed, because if I know you want to be committed, you may no longer want to be in this tango dance with me. All right. Red flag to me. What about you?
So I just put there, and I want people who are watching now, even the replay, do you think it's important to discuss your relationship desires when you meet someone? So there's so much out there in terms of how soon is too soon to tell someone what you're looking for, what you desire. And so, the opinions are range. I am of the opinion to tell people up front what you desire. In other words, if you know you're looking to be married to someone, the person comes up to you and introduces themselves. I'm not saying at that point you say, hey, I want to be married. Do you want to marry me? That's not what I'm saying. I am suggesting, though, if you meet someone, you're going out to dinner, you're hanging out early on, maybe by the second date, we're having a conversation about, life. What's your goals? What are you looking for? And I understand that this may vary based on where you are in your life. But to be honest with you, I was of this opinion when I was in my 20s. So, because I knew early in my life what my trajectory was. So, I knew I was committed to that. So, whomever I was dating needed to understand that. And so, in that regard, yes, I think that two things need to happen. I think up front, let everybody know what your plan is. If you're not planning to be married, then don't follow the path of allowing someone to believe that's what you want when you know you don't. Similarly, if you know that you don't want to have any children, or if you don't want to have any more children, and you have had surgical procedures to prevent such, have that conversation early as well. Because it's unfair for people's feelings to get involved when you know something different. Finally, I'll say, I think defining what is dating. Like, we're talking about that, but everybody has their own definition of what it means to date. And so for you and the person you're with, you all need to define that together to make sure you're on the same page. Because I know there have been persons who, from their perspective, they were dating, which equal commitment. Their partner was like, yeah, we're dating. They never defined it. So for the partner, dating was, we date other people. It was not monogamous in their definition. And so the person made an assumption and was ultimately hurt. So yes, I think you need to have those conversations early.
Yeah. When Yaz and I started dating, so Yaz and I, of course, we worked together, we ministry together, and so we knew each other and were great friends, right, for years. So I already knew her, she already knew me pretty well. So literally, after our first date, like as I was dropping her off at home, I told her, like, I need you to know that I want to be married, and if we date, like I really could see you as my wife, and so I need you to know this isn't a thing where I'm wasting time and just dating to date you. You need to know that if you come on this journey with me, it's headed to a particular path, is my intent. Like, I went through a lot, like, it completely overwhelmed her. Right. I'm seeing 30 getting closer and closer at this time, but I'm still in my 20s. End up being right at 30 when we get married. She's younger than me, so she's in her mid 20s. But with that said, I knew, right? I knew what I wanted. I also knew, right, before that I wasn't at that place, right? Despite I wanted to be and all that kind of stuff, we did that dance, right? So what you've got to know is, like, even if it's overwhelming, and it was overwhelming for her, that was a lot to process. We talk about all the time. She talks about how she just had never even had that experience with a guy where it was like that straightforward, that much at that point in time. So that forced her to even weigh on her side, well, am I ready for that? Like, I know I've been saying I want somebody who's going to treat me this way, but now, like, this is heavy. With that said, it forces everybody to really sort through where you are if you're going to engage, and what that means, right? And of course, there's this dance that happens for months with us as she's sorting through that and everything. And ultimately, I was like, well, I'm backing off and that kind of thing. And by the time, we come full circle on that thing, literally, because she did not want to see me go, I literally asked her the question then, hey, so what does this mean? Because I need to know, can we date other people? Because if not, I need to know, because basically I'm going to have to cut people off, blah, blah, blah. Right. So literally we had that conversation when we got to that point. And it's all about that. Again, you got to be able to have those kind of communications, because if you don't, that's going to just come on into your marriage. Or it's not even leading to marriage, because you're on one page and the person you're dating is on the other page. And now you're going to feel like, man, I wasted all this time, pouring into this relationship, when this person really wasn't even headed in the same direction as I thought we were, because we never really defined it. Right. So
So let me, that is very good. I'm glad we are in sync, right? In terms of that. And so I have another non-negotiable. I put it in the chat and it's a question I'm gonna post up here. But I
uh-oh.
want to say, okay, I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna say this because she's my mama. So mama posted from a senior's perspective, right? This makes me think of later daters. I don't know how many of you all saw this on Netflix, but for all of our persons who are watching now on the replay, and you 55 and above, you are a later dater, or you watch Golden Bachelor. And I only thought of that because my mama talking about from a senior, basically from a senior perspective. This is true for you as well, right? We're not just talking about 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Some things look different, right? Because the reality is when you get older and you may have insurance, retirement, that's a house, that's a whole different conversation, right? But my question in the chat, and this goes to a red flag, what is your non-negotiable? Do you know for yourself what are your non-negotiables? Oftentimes, last week we talked about dating yourself as a single, but oftentimes we don't spend the time figuring out what are our non-negotiables. So, number one, the benefit of knowing that up front is because if someone presents with something that's on your non-negotiable list, guess what? That's a red flag. So, how many of you all watching now or later do you know what your non-negotiables are? What are they? A non-negotiable for me is someone who does not travel. Mm-mm. Somebody who stays home all the time. There isn't anything wrong with that. If that's you, bless you in your ministry. It's just the reality that just won't be us together. My daddy said, you say to her, let's, she said, go. So, of course, that's not going to work, right? So, that's a non negotiable. You cannot be a stay at home person all the time and don't like to travel. You don't want to get on a plane. You don't want to get your passport stamped. That's a reality for me. So, in that regard, I can have that conversation up front. So, what are your thoughts about that, Pastor Byron?
Oh, I completely agree. I think about often just, again, when my wife and I got together, we were living in New York. A non-negotiable for me as relates to living out my call was if you can't just leap by faith. And what I mean by leap by faith, like we've had to completely relocate to a different state, a few times now. like just go, right? And so you have to adapt to a whole new culture, right? Yaz had to learn how to drive for the first time when we left New York. She lived her whole life not having to do that, how to adapt to the South. So it would be unfair to her, right? If I knew that this is what the Lord had for me and what was just a part of my life, had been before then, right? That's how I get north and all that. And then I bring somebody into that. Where that just does not fit. And we knew that, right? It's like we're meeting, we're talking. It's like, yeah, I just want to live here my whole life. I can't see myself going anywhere else. And I would hate it if I did. Well, we're probably, that's probably not going to work, right? Like it's probably just not going to work because you're going to hate being with me. You may love me, but you're going to hate being with me because of the life that the Lord has called me to live. Now, that does not mean, because sometimes people, then they sit with that, right? And the Lord can touch their heart. They can grow and they go, you know what? This that I thought was a non-negotiable, I'm open to evolving and changing and shifting, right? Those are possibilities that happen. It happens with people, even with kids, as you mentioned it, where, hey, one person said, never want any more kids. But you know what? The right person causes them to realign and go, you know what? I felt that way before I connected with you, and being with you, I'm willing to make that sacrifice or do that, right? But you have to know that you really are shifting in your desire and that you're not just trying to be someone that you're not, because then you'll be inauthentic. And at some point you'll tap out emotionally. Like you just can't sustain that because it's just not who you are. And you'll get frustrated wearing the mask. Okay. I think we got some folk chiming in here.
We
in the
do.
chat. This is good.
Hmm. So I've been posting them as they've been coming in. I think I'll go back real quick to what you said about potential, right? So I want to be clear. You know, if you go into it wanting children and he says he doesn't want any more children, believe him at his word. If he changes, fine. But you have to go in with it. If he or she doesn't change, that you're okay with that. So then we have here, oops, let me put it
Yeah,
back up.
this is a good one. Good comment right here.
Mm-hmm. So I will say as a woman, right? So this is not all women. So Brother Troxler, if I'm pronouncing it right here, is mentioning about telling a woman that you're looking for a wife and then they jump ahead. Now,
Yeah.
it is true. I will say that I've had conversations with sisters about jumping ahead. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen for brothers. I am saying, though, oftentimes a sister will meet a brother and she is already picking out her wedding dress. She already knows what she's going to wear, who her bridesmaids going to be, where we going to live. Hold up. How did you go from here to here? That brother just said hello, and you already are factoring in based on what you see how life is gonna be. That really is. Come on, don't be what they say, don't be so thirsty. Bring that thing back on here. So you gotta have that conversation, right? In as much as for guys, I'm saying women with the wedding, but I'm saying with brothers, you see this woman, you're like, oh, she looking good, she pleasing to the eye. Don't be jumping in that bed. Think about what you're gonna be doing with her so quick. Back it on up. Don't be so thirsty. Take the time, have conversation. But yes, that was a very good comment about timelines and managing expectations, right? And we should be able to say, to the person that we're talking to, you know, if you're talking to a brother and the brother tells you, yes, I'm interested in being married, and let's say it were me and I was like, oh, okay, well, have you ever thought where you want to get married, you know, what month you want to be married in? It should be okay for that brother to say, okay, I said I want to be married, but I'm not there yet. And as the woman, you not get offended or hurt or internalize it that he's saying he doesn't want to marry you, because that's not what he said. What he said was, I want to be married someday. And that's it. Period. There's no comma there. Period. What's your thoughts, Pastor?
No, I agree. My situation, because again, we were friends. We worked together. I mean, we had been with each other and supported one another and were very adamant of making sure that there were boundaries up, right? We knew about other people who we had dated over that course of time, over those years, etc. And so we really knew each other, which made it to where literally our first date was awkward because we would start talking about things and I go, oh yeah, I remember, because oh, and then she starts saying something, or I'd start saying something. She's like, yeah, I remember because blah, blah. And so we recognized how close we had gotten. So literally the same experience still should happen, right? We didn't know that it was happening. Like, it's just the way it worked out, right? But you should be intentional about really getting to know each other, again, without crossing those other boundaries necessarily that really muddy the water of what the relationship is, right? And so one of the things I tell people all the time, because some of the things that we're working through in premarital is that people really had blurred the lines of dating and marriage. And because of that, it created some problems. And I had to say, well, part of what you're dealing with here is you're dealing with a marital problem without a marital commitment, which automatically creates some pretty deep tension and frustration, because how do you pick and choose, right? How do you pick and choose? All right, we're gonna do this marital thing, but withhold this marital thing. Like, so we're gonna, so your life really hasn't been made one, but you've started coupling it as if it is. So even when the other person could literally just break up, there's no divorce that happens. You just break up. Well, you just break up, but we bought a house. That's not under my name. That's under yours. But I contributed to this. We We got a car, all this. And these are things that I have seen play out. So when you muddy those waters and you start doing a lot of marital things without marital commitment, there's a huge risk that you're putting out there, and you're missing some steps of what you really should have been focused on during that season, that you have to then somehow back up and get. And that can become very tricky. Very, very, very tricky.
Oh, so I know our time is coming upon us. We get excited and talking, and time is on us. So I did just kind of want to say, because I know we were talking about dating and being single and cuffing season, like being single and secure and cuffing. So I think ultimately, are we saying, Pastor, cuff or no cuff? I will say, for me personally, I'm not taking the position of saying what you should do in your respective life. What I am suggesting, though, is that you're very clear about, before you do anything, that when you are in a dating relationship, before you even decide to date, actually, the work begins with you first as a single. So back to our title of being single and secure, that you make sure that you are living a life that you are secure in who you are and whose you are. You know the source of your strength. You know that you are a person, a man, a woman, independent of any relationship, that you don't, that is not what defines who you are. And so then after you are in that place, you know your likes, what you don't like. We talked about that in part 1. You can see that. That's already out on YouTube. And then from there, you move forward into, okay, yes, I now want to date this person. So yes, you define, what does date meaning for me first. So when I decide as a single, I'm ready to date, I need to know what type of dating I'm looking to do. Am I dating for marriage? Am I just hanging out? What is that? I need to know that so I can communicate that once I'm connected with someone, and then go from there. And so if you do choose to cuff, like if it's cold outside and you want to do truly, as Pastor Byron defined cuffing last week, if all you want to do is cuff, and you as two individuals decide that we just cuffing in the winter like the bears, we in hibernation together working from home, and we just gonna cuff so we can stay warm. If that's what you're choosing to do as grown adults, then okay, that's the decision. But make sure your communication is to the point that you're very clear about, this is all this is, and there isn't anything more. And in more instances than not, eventually somebody's thought is going to change. Springtime is coming. So understand, cuffing is winter, hibernation. Springtime is coming. And the person you cuff with may be done and ready to hit those streets. So again, just be honest with yourself, the persons that you're talking to, about what your desire might be. Pastor Byron?
Yeah. So this is a place where the pastor and therapists are gonna disagree a little bit. All right. Mm-hmm. I understand and agree with what Dr. Frederica said as far as autonomous and you grown, you do what you do. From my perspective, though, as a pastor, and from a biblical perspective, I just can't see a justification for cuffing. I believe that every season is intentional, and that if the Lord has you in a season where you are single, you need to own and be in that season. And that if you don't do that and surrender to that season, then you are cutting your own blessing short, that you won't be prepared. Because remember, God does not have to bless you during your winter season. God may bless you during the summer, right? God may, right? So every season, to everything, there's a season. There's a reason for that season for you. And if you pigeonhole God down to where something has to happen here or then or on that timeline, whatever, then we're just not walking by faith. And we're wanting what we want, and then we're just going to make it happen. And here's the other thing I'll say, because also in this season with so much going on, what's going on in what is now, I guess, Trump's America, right? You may be looking for some unhealthy coping that leaves you very vulnerable. during this time. And people are going to take advantage of that. You just trying to feel good or whatever. And so your cuffing season may try to get elongated, right? Because this stuff's still going to exist after the sun comes up in the spring weather and the birds start chirping again. So I said all that to say, sometimes it may be that we just need to sit and deal with where we are and invite God into that space. And just because the world is cuffing, again, different perspectives. So I'm going to hit you with what Pastor Byron got to say today, right? If that's the season, be obedient to that season, be faithful to that season, and know that is our belief as Christians that suffering, temporary suffering, is a part of this walk. Right? It's the will of God that you suffer for a season. That's the word of the Lord. Long suffering is a fruit of the spirit. We don't like to talk about that. It's like, I like love. I like peace. I like joy. I like all the other fruits, but not that long suffering fruit. But sometimes, right? Sometimes the winter season is a long suffering season, and that doesn't make it easier. I'm not minimizing it. I know you can look at me and say, yeah, Pastor, but you married, you got your bride, you got your person, y'all been together, blah, blah, blah. And all of that is true. But I was also single for a long time, right? And everybody has their struggle, everybody has their walk, everybody has their thing. And so my perspective is, I just don't see a biblical precedent that makes cuffing okay. Wait on the Lord and be of good cheer. Wait, hold on. All right, we're out of time. We're out of time. I got more red flags to share too that I could come back with. I got like 5 more red flags here, locked and loaded.
Well, we want to thank y'all for joining us today. And we hope that you found something that we said to encourage you on your journey. Pastor and a Therapist podcast, we will be back next month, God willing, the 2nd and 4th Thursdays of March. If you have not done so already, please go over to YouTube and like and subscribe to our page so that we can connect with you, our friends and family, but also those who don't know us and don't know you, to grow this community. Thank you all again for joining us. Stay safe and stay warm. All right. Take care. God bless.
Bye, everybody.